In this talk, so this is Reconstruct, Restore, and Reimagine. New perspective on Stoke Newington's history through AI. Now, AI is everywhere. I'm sure that you read about it every day in different contexts, whether it's jobs, copyrights, the end of the world as we know it, all those things. I'm just going to talk about local history. If someone doesn't want to use any of these tools for whatever reason, that's fine. But I just want to show you some of the things that I think really have potential as far as giving us a newfound understanding and appreciation of our local history. Now, those of you that know me, for me, image editing and photoshopping is something I've been doing for the last 30 years, since my early teens. I did these mashups a few years ago that I still do sometimes, where I kind of blend old and new photos, and it's great. You use design tools to kind of give people a newfound understanding of where these old buildings used to be, or what this street used to look like. Now, this is just a video that gives you a sense of how I use Photoshop. So you can see that there's a lot of tools, and you can drag, and you can select, and you can resize, and you can add these guides. It's a very fun experience for me personally, but this is how for the last 30 years I would create and manipulate images. Just using these tools. You can select like a pencil, and an eraser, and a rectangle tool, and you can see there's a whole menu, and you can pick things. And it's really cool. But there's only so much you can do with it. Over the years, there were a lot of ideas that I had that I thought either I cannot do it, or it's going to take me a long, long time. So for example, I wanted to create like a view of the new river along Church Street. But I thought, I'm going to have to find like a canal in the same angle as the photo, and then I'm going to have to start like stretching it, and it's going to look fake. A lot of ideas that I realized, you know what, Photoshop is not going to help me, and I just put them aside. As I mentioned, this is what the tool looks like. And there's places you can go and you can pick colors, and you've got full control. But when you start creating images using AI, it's a very different experience, because what you've got to work with is this. It's very different. AI, or generative AI, understands human language, and it can generate images, videos, sounds, and whatnot. But your only way to communicate with it is by text. Is by just explaining, can you please create an image of a Georgian townhouse on a corner with two people standing outside? You might get something that's good, you might get something that you really don't like, and you have to go through it again and again. I would say that using AI is all about expectation management, because what you have in your head and what you end up getting sometimes, it's very, very different, and you have to kind of calibrate and tweak your expectations. So one very simple example. And there's a lot of things I've been playing with, and I'm just going to share a few. Over the years, I collected a lot of these lovely drawings of like old mansions that basically existed before the cameras were. And I often asked myself, what if I could go back in time and take a photo of that building? Or what would it look like if it was actually realistic, photorealistic render? And in this case, a very simple instruction, just make a photorealistic render of this sketch. And this is what you get. Now, if you're eagle-eyed and you're going to start using a magnifying glass, you're going to say, hold on, the brick bonding is different. And it's not a sash window, and the bush is in the wrong place, and so on. You'll never get it accurate, and you have to psychologically understand that you're getting something that at best is going to be similar-ish. And you might think it's good enough, or you may not. But I think being a perfectionist, you can get easily very disappointed and very frustrated. And you can start saying, no, change the door so it's kind of like a rounded thingy at the top. It might do that, but then he also changes the window. And then you say, I didn't say change the window. It says, you didn't say not to change the window. Right? So you have to get used to that. There's a lot of uses for it. You can upload a photo and actually say, can you date this one for me? And it starts looking at the clothes and the car and the architecture. May not be accurate, but it gives you something to work with that you can start think about. And I get asked a lot. And sometimes you think, okay, the tram has like the overhead or this and that. It's not the final answer, but it's something that might give you something to work with, which I think is useful. So I kind of just have a few topics I want to cover and just show you some of the experiments and some of the things that I've been playing with. I'm going to start with Clissold Park, which I know we all know and love dearly. And I'm just going to show you some things that I experimented with to try and bring the story of Clissold Park's preservation and the campaign that I've been researching for quite a few years now. So for example, what I did, this is an aerial view from kind of Google, right? And this is the park. Now, as some of you might know, there was real risk that Clissold Park was lost and built on in the 1880s. The church commissioners put it on the market. If it wasn't for local heroes like Joseph Beck and John Runts, it would have been built on, and it would have been streets. And I'll talk about that in a minute. And I often wondered, how can I explain to people how important this open space is? Because when you say they would have built on it and so on, I thought, you know what, I'll show you. If they lost the campaign, imagine that Clissold Park would have looked like this. And this is generous, because all these streets that would have been built on the site, in this example, they still have lovely gardens. But even the ability to quickly visualize what the park might have looked like in some horrible alternate reality is something that I could have never done in Photoshop. I would have needed to kind of start pasting and resizing all these things. And when I posted this online, someone commented and said, "It doesn't look real because you left the ponds." And I was like, well, I wanted to keep something that makes it relatable and you can recognize it. But I thought, you know what? This was development number one. This was Victorian. And then there was regeneration of the area, and it looked like this. And they actually used the ponds, and this is a sympathetic design in their honor. But this is not, I mean, it might look far-fetched, but if Joseph Beck and the committee failed in their campaign, and I'm sure there's like a Back to the Future episode there, right? This, I mean, I would definitely say this could have just happened. It would have happened. Now, another way to try to visualize to people how important that campaign was is saying, okay, this is Church Street and this is the park next to the church. What would it have looked like if it was actually built and it became all streets? Right? And I think it's these kind of visualizations that I think, as far as connecting people to the campaign, making them really appreciate and realize how important the park is and how, I would say, valuable and incredibly important that campaign was for all of us. The two people I mentioned, Joseph Beck and John Runts, are photographed here. Joseph Beck is in the middle. This is his partner in crime, John Runts, and they were the leaders of the campaign. I'm really chuffed to say that we have a special guest tonight here. We have the great-great-granddaughter of Joseph Beck. Where are you? There she is. Liz, thanks so much for coming. So yes, let's give a round of applause. Yes. Now, one of the things that you can also do with AI is to add a bit of movement to photos, which is something I was dabbling with as well. So you give it this little image, and you ask it to just animate it for like 4 seconds, just to bring it to life a bit, and you get this. Now, these are very popular in sort of family history websites. People get, it's quite emotional where you can see your ancestors or your nan waving, you know, people that you've always seen in very formal portraits. All of a sudden, just like 4 seconds, make it come alive, and you start realizing that they were real people. This is probably one of my favorite photos of Joseph Beck. He was a mountaineer, he was a traveler, he was a cyclist, he was a real Victorian Renaissance man. I love this photo, and this is what you get. So you get, I mean, maybe he didn't smile exactly like that. Maybe the way that he held his cigar was a bit different, but this is better than nothing. It gives us something to connect with, and I think it makes Joseph a bit more real. Another aspect of the park that I was always curious about, there used to be stables just next to the church. You can see them on the map. These were kind of the stables. You can see them here as well. You had all these kind of arches along the wall, and there was a long wall just going along Church Street. And this is just a visual of what it might have looked like if they kept it. Again, it's not 100%. I had to tweak it a few times, but it's much more difficult otherwise to imagine it. Now you can see that it completely changed, like the housing in the background. And like I said, it's up to you if you want to spend the next hour saying, don't change the council housing on the corner of Clissold Road, or just think, you know what, it's just an impression, it's an interpretation. If I'm going to start being very kind of picky about it, then I might as well just try and draw it myself. This is the opening ceremony of the park, July 24th. 1889, that's when the park finally opened. This is one of only 2 photos that were taken of that glorious day, and this is just trying to bring it to life a bit. So if they had a drone, this is what it might have looked like. So again, just giving us a bit more appreciation. There's no manual to the things you can do or cannot do with AI, and I think if you're a semi-creative person, sometimes out of boredom, you might think, can it actually do this? And I was just curious one day, can it actually generate like a box of Lego and turn some of these old photos into a Lego model? It was a long conversation with someone. So for that event, imagine if there was the history edition. Imagine that in the new cafe. That would be a hit. You could also get Clissold House. I was talking to someone about Clissold Park and the work to renovate the play area that's scheduled for next year. And as we were just talking on WhatsApp, I said, you know what? I've got an idea for the council for the new play area. What about? Right? And all I did was just upload a photo of Clissold House, and I just wrote, make this into a play area for kids. And this was the first attempt. You know, you can say add kids or remove this. But I do like the fact that sometimes you have ideas and they might be completely bonkers and you think, there's no way I can draw it. I'm not going to spend a week now trying to Photoshop it. But the fact that just on your phone, and you usually get that result within 10 seconds, you just type it, might be okay, may not be. This is the old miniature railway that used to be in Clissold Park. Originally along the paddling pool, and then it moved to the ponds. So this is one of the photos, and this is an AI video of it. Just giving you a taste, and then it moved. And this is by the ponds. It was also the boating lake. It's not perfect, but you get something. Clissold Park was named after Reverend Augustus Clissold, who lived there from 1835 till his death in 1882. This is the only known portrait of him. Again, like I said, like an ancestor. They always look very serious. It was a formal portrait, probably the only one you're going to have taken in your life. But if you just want to bring him to life a bit, maybe, maybe if this was a photo and you said, okay, are we done now? I want to go and stroll in my very big garden. This is another view of Clissold Park with the old rustic bandstand, a little snippet. We don't have those videos, and so many times when I look at these old photos, and sometimes like on YouTube, you see like old footage from other parts of London or other countries and other cities. I really say, I wish we had those for Clissold and Stoke Newington. I don't think we do. Maybe one day they'll surface. So again, this is the closest thing. Another thing that I was curious about, I gave a talk I think a couple of years now, about, this was the plan for London in 1943. You can see that the idea was to create all these green corridors, and they wanted to connect all these parks. So Hackney Downs connected to Abney Park, connected to Clissold, connected to Highbury Fields. It was all going to create this lovely green corridor. And I was curious to see what that might look like or could have looked like. So this is an aerial that you know. And if that plan went ahead, it might have looked something like this. Ooh, if only. I like how the trees from Abney kind of blend into the park as well. I mentioned earlier that one of the many ideas I had was, can I create the new river along Church Street where it used to be up until 1958. It was a bit tricky in Photoshop, but now it's a bit easier. And you can see it in old photos, but this just makes it a bit more realistic. You get a bit more of a sense of what it could have looked like. So this was all about Clissold Park and how you gain, I think, a newfound appreciation of the people, the place, things that didn't happen, could have happened, it would have been a tragedy. But this is a way of maybe communicating those events in local history a bit better. The next thing I want to talk about are shops that I'm also interested in. I've done the research on Church Street, the history of all the shops. It's a topic that I think is really, really interesting. There's a lot of these lovely old photos where you see the shopkeeper kind of standing very proudly, usually with an apron and the flat cap. So I thought, what can I do with them just to bring that photo to life a bit? This is a really simple one, just kind of walking outside, looking around. But because AI, this is a very simple scenario. Sometimes, maybe after a few drinks as well, you get a bit experimental and creative, and you realize, hold on, I can do much more than just the guy going outside and spinning. And there's no limit, because the next video, I don't know what happened. I think something went wrong and ended up with this. Right? So it's completely up to you. I mean, you could take that historical photo and turn it into something completely psychedelic that makes no sense. Other things, this is number 163 on the corner of Woodley Road. So this is Church Street. And this is the two shopkeepers at the time. And then just something very subtle, just to make you kind of think about that shop in a different way. Another thing that I always wanted to do, and this is another future talk, is all these ghost shops. So I estimate that Stoke Newington lost about 150 shops over the years for various reasons. In many cases, you can still see the traces where the shop used to be, the shop fascia, and you can see the corbels and all the features. And I always wanted to kind of almost just illustrate or reimagine, what did it look like when there was a shop? Maybe it looked like this. Again, it's not perfect. Maybe that person was never there. Maybe they didn't sell this and that. But it's just an impression. It's an interpretation. It's something that allows you to look at it a bit differently. Across the street, there's another one. This used to be a shop as well. Maybe it looked like this. Obviously, it gets the names wrong. And there's a lot of things, like I said, if you're going to start nitpick, you're not going to enjoy it. I think sometimes you just have to accept it and kind of think about the things that might actually add value. Now, this is another example that actually a friend that helped me animate with another AI tool. And there's whole parades. So for example, Neville Road, all these used to be shops. You want to think what it might have looked like. Now, when I shared this, someone asked me, was there really like a dairy on the corner of so-and-so? I was like, no, you know what? I would have loved to research and know exactly that in 1922 there was a dairy or a butcher. This is just to give you like a rough idea. But then I thought, hold on, I actually have the timeline, not just of 1 year, but of every shop on Church Street from its inception. And this is kind of an ongoing project. And what I thought, hold on, I can create that image of what it used to look like for each of those and create a whole visual timeline that tells you the story of a shop, not just through a spreadsheet, but as an actual visual, if you like. And I'm going to show you the one I created. I did 6. It was very time consuming. I did one for number 113, which goes back all the way to the 1820s. Okay, so I created a visual for each one of these just to show the evolution of the shop over time. So it was quite difficult because I had to give it the description of the architecture and the doors in the middle and the design this. And with the passing of time, I had to say this shop was there in the 1820s and then the 1950s. So there was a lot of tweaking, but again, you have to just calibrate and realize, okay, it's good enough. I'm going to move on. So let's see how that shop evolved. So that's the Go sign that's on the building. So that's the Walker Brothers with a fount pen. So next time you walk past, hopefully now you've got maybe a bit more kind of understanding of what that shop used to look like. Cool. While we're talking about Church Street, this is one of my favorite photos from 1922 when there was cattle running through Church Street for various reasons. And clearly, when I thought about what can I animate with AI, I couldn't help myself. So I mentioned the mashups that I was doing in Photoshop. I did look at ways that maybe I can make them, I guess, kind of blend more naturally. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. So for example, this was the old Black Bull pub at number 192 High Street. The building is still there, but today it's KFC. So trying to create a mashup of that photo, inserting it into that location, making it look kind of realistic, resulted in this. This was Daniel Defoe's house in Church Street. So Defoe Road basically run through the middle today. So this was the house where Daniel Defoe lived. So like I showed you at the beginning, I was curious to see, can I just render it to look a bit more realistic? It's not 100%, you know, sometimes it's too close, it's too far, can be a bit frustrating. But then what I started doing recently is taking this and then putting that into Photoshop. So I'm now using both, because I knew that if I wanted to create this and demonstrate where it stood, with AI, it would have taken me way too long. So what I do now, I create something in AI, and then I bring it into Photoshop, and then I basically just use both tools. Another examples is Devonshire Square Church. Used to be on the corner of Stoke Newington Road and Walford Road, right there. And the mashup looks like this. Another church is the Methodist Church on the High Street. It's now in its 4th incarnation, just next to Sainsbury's. This is the 4th one. This was the 2nd one. And if they kept it, you never know, this could have been the view next time you go to Sainsbury's. Another example is Holland House, which stood on the corner of Newington Green and Albion Road, knocked down in 1960. And the mashup, when you combine the two, is this. Proportions are not great, not exactly. Next example is Marks and Spencer, that used to be on the High Street. The building is still there, you wouldn't know it. It's now Sports Direct. Had they kept it, the view today could have looked similar-ish to this. If only. This is the old town hall. This was Stoke Newington's first town hall. It was in Milton Grove, originally South Hornsey's. It was on the corner of Milton Grove and Town Hall Approach, hence the name, Town Hall Approach. This is the view today. There's the 1960s council housing. I tried to kind of do like a little mashup, which gave me this. The thing is, once you start counting the number of the windows and the details, you think, oh no, we forgot one. Try and fix it, you're gonna lose the door. It's not worth it. This is West Hackney Church in Stoke Newington Road, corner of Amherst Road, bombed in 1940. The present building is from 1960. The mashup gives you this. I love how it also pedestrianized and kind of looked at some traffic calming measures as well, just to give you kind of, just to chip in a bit. So I showed you some examples of taking old kind of drawings and turning them into photorealistic renders, which I think sometimes is interesting. This was Abney Chapel in Church Street, opposite the cemetery. It was also bombed and demolished. The rendering at a slight angle gives you this. And if you try and mash up that in today's streetscape, you get this. The example I showed at the beginning was the rear elevation of Fleetwood House. Fleetwood House was a 60-room mansion built in 1635 on the site where Fleetwood Street is today and the fire station. This was the rear. Could have been like a nice hotel today. This is the render. This was actually up the road. This is the Alexandra Theatre, built in 1897. It was very similar to the Hackney Empire. It was just between Belgrade Road and Princess May Road. This was the very glamorous interior. When you photorealistic render it, you get this. This was actually Church Street, believe it or not. So this is Newington Hall. It was at the very top of Church Street, where the New River Cafe is. So the whole space between the New River Cafe and Green Lanes was just this one house with a big, big garden. Demolished in 1872. Photorealistic render of that and trying to make it look more contemporary gives you this. The rear of Newington Hall was this. Again, very quick sketch that someone kind of did in a few minutes. Gives you this. This is the very first Rose and Crown. Okay, it was opposite its current location. It was demolished in 1932, rebuilt across the street due to road widening. And I was just curious, what would this look like if this was like photorealistic? It's a bit spooky to an extent, but you get this. This is William Patton. So if you ever wondered the school named after and so on, he was the first Lord of the Manor of Stoke Newington. He rebuilt and extended the old church. So the school was renamed after him. And again, it looks okay, but I was curious what he might have looked like as a real person. You get this. And you think, but, you know, was William kind of like a smiley person? Was he a happy person? Maybe. You never know. Other things I did was just taking old photos and doing the same type of like photo rendering. It's not colorizing them. You're going to see it just takes them. So this is the old cinema that's today is a mosque in Stoke Newington Road. Just to kind of see more, some of the details a bit more. An extraordinary Jewish drama. This is now the violin shop in Church Street when it was the electricity showrooms. You get this? And this was the Methodist church that I mentioned. You do the rendering. You get this view. This was another mansion at the very top of Church Street. This was the Willows. This was all demolished. Could have looked like this today. Just corner of Clissold Crescent. This is Abney House. This is basically when you go into Abney Cemetery, the gate used to lead to this mansion. This is the render of it. The site today looks a bit different. Looks like this, right? But this is the original gateway, or at least some of it. And I often wondered, what would that view look like if Abney House was still standing? It was demolished in 1843. Might have looked like this. This is the existing sign in Lordship Terrace. This is what it used to look like. So this is just another way of trying to reconstruct that signage. This is a photo of the very sad-looking Stoke Newington town guide that used to be outside the cemetery. This is the late 70s. The map was completely taken. It used to be this interactive map with lights that you press on. I found a photo of it in the Hackney Museum from the one that used to be in Dalston, merged the two in the same little exercise, and you get this. So if they ever wanted to restore it, there used to be a row of houses that was built on the site of Fleetwood House that I mentioned. So this is the corner of Fleetwood Street and Church Street. Unfortunately, there are no photos of what they used to look like apart from this one. So you can kind of, this is where the fire station is today. You can see there were houses there with bay windows on the ground floor. I used that to try to imagine what that might have looked like originally. This is just next to us. So this is St. Matthias Church. This actually used to be a built-up area. It used to be a little square with houses on each side. No photos, so I thought I'll give it a go, see what they might have looked like. Ended up with this. Based on the map, they were severely damaged due to bombing, and that site was later used for prefabs, which may or may not look exactly like this, but you get the general idea. And today it looks like this. This used to be a beer house, which is like a pub. So this is in Allen Road, corner of Shakespeare Walk. I always wondered what it looked like when it was a pub. No photos, unfortunately. So this is the best I could do. This was the name. When you look at old photos and there are no cars, people often say the road used to be so wide. And I'm like, it's the same width. You just don't see all of it. So I was curious to see, can AI help reimagine what these streets might have looked like before there were cars on either side? and tarmac. This used to be a pub, the Atlas. And this is Barrett's Grove. So you can see that there's all these experiments, all these things you can try to imagine and see where it takes you. This is something I've done recently as well. All these grand old houses on Albion Road, all this used to be a very lush front garden. Maybe something more like this. Next time you go up Stamford Hill, past the birdcage, there's this lovely old house. You wouldn't think it was a big mansion. And the front probably looked something similar-ish to this. In reality, though, for those big mansions, there would have been a carriage sweep that you can actually see on the map, right? So it wasn't like a front path. I did try, I didn't want to spend too much time on it, so it was probably, it was a U-shape. This terrace on Church Street has all these Victorian shop extensions, but they used to be just residential houses. I played a bit with AI and also Photoshop just to create a version of what they might have looked like originally when you kind of take away those extensions. The town hall used to be camouflaged. Today the paint is very faded. I was always curious to know what it might have looked like. In Photoshop, I tried sometimes to color it in, very time consuming. So this was quite handy. One of my fascinations is pubs and how they used to be partitioned. This is the Shakespeare. In some cases, you can still see traces where the pub interior was split between public, saloon, private, and so on. I often wanted to reconstruct what those interiors might have looked like. So this is me adding that partition. So this is Cowper Road, which is just here, actually pronounced Cooper Road, believe it or not. It was completely demolished as part of the Butterfield Green creation in the mid-80s. So the entrance on Allen Road to Butterfield Green used to be exactly that. It's quite difficult to try to imagine the two. So I thought, can I actually take this gate and almost place it there, just to give an impression of the location, and you get this. And that's the exact same location. So it's just a way of trying to visualize, just trying to connect the two. Or you can do the reverse and just put a road in the middle. And that was that. Thank you very much.